Hey, everybody out there in YouTube land, welcome to the third episode of the Elvis Nation Show. And I'm your friendly neighborhood reactioneer, just a guy trying to get his piece of the feast. I certainly hope you are as well. Man, I am stoked, righteously stoked. At least I like to think we have a great episode. We'll see in the comment sections if we delivered or not. And so before we dive into this week's proceedings, please subscribe if you haven't done so. Hit that like button. Visit us on the comment section. Most importantly, if you know any Elvis fans, spread the word. Share your videos. You can, there's a little share thing under the video screen. Post it in your YouTube, or not in YouTube, but your Facebook page or Twitter, what have you. And let's get people involved in this, because I think, or at least like to think, we have something kind of special going on here. But anyway, the first thing we're going to dive into, there was a news station in Louisville that did a time capsule presentation from 1977, where one of their reporters traveled to Memphis to cover Elvis's funeral. And it's about a little 5-minute piece, I think, but I just found it really interesting. A lot of great footage, a couple like street interviews with some of the mourners, and so I thought we would present it here. Let's go into the Elvis Presley Theater Auditorium for some reaction time.
This week, 44 years ago, would go down in history. It was the week Elvis Presley died and then was laid to rest at Graceland, the singer's 13-acre estate in Memphis, Tennessee. The world's eyes were on the funeral services. 30,000 fans attended, including former WHAS 11 anchor Jim Mitchell. In tonight's WHAS 11 Vault, we revisit his trip.
For the man they called the King, this is the rock and roll world's state funeral. They began lining up here late last night. They sat through sweltering 90-degree temperatures waiting to pay their final respects to Elvis Presley.
August 1977. WHAS 11 anchor Jim Mitchell stood among the tens of thousands of fans flocking to Memphis, Tennessee, hoping for a chance to get inside Graceland. Elvis fans were heartbroken at the news of his passing. Some in the crowd even fainted, Mitchell reported.
He was my hero. He was the only thing in this whole wide world that mattered to me. I love him so much. He's a fabulous person. I don't know what I feel. It's just, I feel empty.
Back home in Louisville, WHAS 11 reporters found their way to local record stores.
Well, what you're hearing is the song of a man who became a legend in his own time. The song that you're hearing is probably one of the last singles he ever cut, and it's on this album, which is probably one of the last albums he ever cut. One of the many albums that will probably become collector's items.
Fans buying up his records, mourning his death.
I don't know, it's just sad that we lost him.
380 miles away, Jim Mitchell reported live from the funeral.
Elvis was not just the singer, he was the song. For these people, the anthem of a generation that grew up in the 50s and 60s.
The doors to Graceland were closed to the public, but many celebrities drove in to attend, and crowds grew big outside the gates, some driving hundreds of miles to be there, including Kentuckians. Mitchell found them and asked them why they made the trip.
Because I loved him so much.
I just can't believe it. I want to come here and see for myself.
You won't be able to see too much today. They'll just be driving by.
No, just see his hearse. It's good enough.
During his lifetime, Elvis was no stranger to Louisville. He performed at the Armory, now known as the Louisville Gardens. This video from our archive showing the music venue in 1956 as excited fans packed the house ahead of the Elvis arrival. About 2 decades later, he was back, this time at Freedom Hall. Our WHAS 11 cameras caught the King leaving the 1974 performance, waving goodbye to his many fans. It was Elvis's long and storied career that led to his popularity and massive turnout on the day of his funeral.
After an hour inside, the funeral party drove down Elvis Presley Boulevard, and a young woman broke from the crowd and tried, it seemed, to throw herself in front of the hearse. Police caught her before any harm could be done, and the procession moved along toward Forest Hill Park.
Elvis was buried in a mausoleum a few hundred yards from where his mother was buried, covered in hundreds of flowers and worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was called a display worthy of the king of rock and roll.
Many people will be saying and writing after this moment that we've come to the end of an era. But maybe not. Elvis once made an album called 50 Million Elvis Fans Can't Be Wrong. And over the years, their numbers grew, and so did their affection. It may be that although the life of Elvis has ended, the legend has not. This is
Amen,
Jim Mitchell,
brother.
News 11 in Memphis.
Historians report during his time in Louisville, Elvis would stay at the 𝐷𝘪𝘥𝘦 Hotel in downtown and visit his grandfather, Jesse D. Presley, who owned a small home.
I was so glad to come across this piece. And interestingly enough, I would go and volunteer every year in Louisville before COVID for my best friend's organization that she works for. And so we've been through that hotel before, and I had no idea that Elvis frequented that place during his visit. So, wow, just... I just thought it was kind of like blissfully kind of spine tingling when he talked about, because he's coming from a 1977 perspective of Elvis will live on and stuff like that. And we're here, so I'm thinking, how cool is that? And, but to watch the, outpouring of grief. But you know what? More so than grief, I saw respect. And I think sometimes that's what you got to glean from that, because with all the sadness or something, there was something beautiful. We're celebrating something amazing. The fact that we're convening at this place and at this time, 44 years later, it just gets me in such a profound way. Okay, wow. I'm telling you what, I could watch that kind of footage all day. I could, oh man, I could just absorb it. Love it. And now we're going to take a focus on our Sunday special presentations, where I collaborate with the inimitable Leon Smith, who has the best Elvis channel out there. And so we're going to take a little step into the Leon Lounge and see what's happening. All right, we are just coming off the heels of the last special presentation that those of you who watched on Sunday, if you haven't, go and watch it, because I'm telling you what, it was amazing. We went into the rehearsal room and, man, oh God, Leon, you know what? One of the main things I gleaned from it, and and this makes me feel good. If I can point something out and then I listen to Leon mention something in your version, that makes me feel like good. I caught something that one of the experts caught, is that Elvis was so in control of the flow of everything. Because you haven't seen my presentation yet, but I just said he has a perfect managerial balance. Like, there's parts where he can joke for a second, but then get right back into it, like without missing. Because sometimes people, they start joking and then the whole thing falls apart and they can't ever pick up where they left off. And how quick he was to jump back and forth. And because, like I said in the thing, Leon, if you make it too much of a fun atmosphere, no work will get done. And if you make it too draconian, it'll not be any fun for them to record. So, wow, what was that like, assembling all that? That must have been fun.
It was fabulous. What you get a sense of, so you see the Culver City rehearsals where it's laid back but serious, and then you move into the convention centre there, and then what you get to see is it's even more serious now, but there's still that, well, we can still have fun at the same time. But if you notice, there was a couple of bits in there where he was a bit irked with a couple of bits and pieces, and he really was, because they wouldn't get it right, especially in bits of Bridge Over Troubled Water, where he was just saying to the backing singers, no, just stay out. I don't want the male voices here. I don't want the female voices. I just want the male voices here. And you really do see Elvis the producer there, and you see how in control and how good his musical knowledge is, his ear is. And in Bridge Over Troubled Water especially, here, because you hear the bit where he's talking about the horns are going to play over the top, and then you can the bit he says to Charlie Hodge about it sounds like the guy's lost, but we don't have to emphasise it. And as much as that sounds a bit jokey, you can actually see the point that he's making there. But putting it together it was a joy, because you're just watching intently, and it's just so good. But what gets even better is the next progression of that, which we'll have in a few weeks' time, we'll move from the convention centre rehearsal onto the stage rehearsal. So that's the next, in that particular, that's the way it is, journey. That'll be the next stage. So, but that's to come in a few weeks' time, of course. But that's the next step in that.
Well, I think too, it's like with you and I, what we do, we have our singular vision. Mm-hmm. We apply our vision. But when you're Elvis in that situation, your job is not only to deliver on your end, but you got to get them to be on the same page you are, to bring what you're hearing in your head into reality. And I don't think if he had such a gifted group of backing singers and instrumentalists that would have been very hard, because sometimes people can't lock on to what you're doing. And sometimes too, the producer might not be clear in what they're saying, but there was a synergy there. You know, there wasn't too much of, oh, you guys are just not getting this, man. And I think that was just brilliant. And I, especially like I said before, the way he balanced the levity with the professionalism, and they were all able to read him pretty well, because sometimes you could joke for a second, but then he would dive in and hit that note. You know, he would sit there and do a false lyric, and then just like, and I'll tell you what, Leon, there was another part that really just, there's a visual component too. He didn't do it too much in this, because a lot of it, he was on the chair. But when he did You Don't Have to Say You Love Me, there's a part where he turns at the beginning when he starts it. And if you had the sound off and just watch that, what a dynamic presence. And that's just in the rehearsal. It's like you could feel that. And I'm telling you what, it's beyond choreography. If you and I just turned the same way in the same speed, I doubt we would have that same luster, you know.
well, let's think about how remarkable what you just watched is, if you put it in this context. So this is Elvis building up to a 56 show engagement for 4 weeks, 2 shows a night. So that in itself is plenty. He's introducing, say, what, 8 to 10 new songs into the set list, 6 of which will be an opening night, but that's kind of normal for a Las Vegas opening night. But then you add in to the fact that the pressure that MGM are going to be filming these shows at the same time. So this isn't just a normal rehearsal. This is a rehearsal for an engagement like no other. Because he has to be. You can sometimes go into an opening show of a Las Vegas engagement where there's nobody recording and it's just the audience there, and if you foul up and make a mistake, you can kind of laugh it off a bit. But when you know that you're being filmed for a movie that you signed up for, the added pressure into that, and that's what makes that so more remarkable. That how easy it was. Even though but I think he kind of forgets. I mean, let's be honest. He did 32 films, but up to that point, so he was used to having the cameras on him. But even then, when you've still got those 56 shows with the first 6 shows being filmed, that pressure's just unimaginable to me.
And you know what? I recorded like 12 videos yesterday. And I needed a nap, okay? I'm not even the one singing. And I don't think people get the energy that requires, because it's not just about being on with your performance or any of that. There's a thing, it's like called being on. It's like, have you ever even had an enjoyable experience and then afterward you just felt like I need to be in my own little world? It was just too much energy going on there. And you're on in so many areas, because Elvis had to answer to other staff people. He had to answer so it was truly a multitasking effort. And I don't know how he, and that's why I hate when people ever sit there and say, well, Elvis got run down and all. I'm like, you try doing that. Try doing 2 performances in one night. And not only that, but, to sit there and have that. thing of I'm returning to my performing in public life, there was an extra kind of layer to throw on that. Even though he, already kind of was getting back into it already, but still it was fairly new into that phase of his career. And I just think watching there's so many things you can glean from those rehearsals. And it was just, there were a couple moments too where he just got in touch with when he was harmonizing, like with the Sweet Inspiration, stuff like that, where it was just sublime. And you're sitting there saying, I think if they had the gift of hindsight, they would have filmed every bloody second of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did mention it when in the email that I sent you accompanying the presentation, that just to be aware that a couple of the performances just cut off for whatever reason. And it really is quite disappointing because it all seems to cut off at the worst possible moments. And I told everybody, if you get to see the video, because this is being recorded before I release the special, when I was listening or watching in the ghetto portion, I said to the people through the camera, I said, usually I don't want to read anything. I want to be totally surprised, but Leon gave me a heads up. And in this case, I'm glad, because I found myself so getting into it. It's almost like being at a great movie and the projector breaks. Like, no, come back. Where are you going? Like, can I just sit there? And I said, oh my gosh. And especially too with that version, when you didn't have the advantage of like the brass and stuff kicking in and stuff, and yet it still sounded magnificent. Yeah. By the way, there's also, you might be interested to know that there is actually one song missing from that presentation. I deliberately left it out. And it's with a view to coming up to Christmas time. Elvis did in between announcing to Charlie Hodge that they were going to do Don't Cry Daddy and actually get into it, he did a off-the-cuff performance of Santa Claus is Back in Town. So well, towards the festive season, when we could maybe do, I thought we'd maybe do some Christmassy stuff and shove that in there. So I deliberately left that out so that you would have a chance to react to that then. If that makes any
definitely
sense.
Definitely.
Yeah. It's just you might get a few comments in the comments board saying that's missing, but that's why it's not there.
Oh, and I'm telling you what, this audience never underestimate their fact-checking abilities.
Oh, absolutely.
They're on it. They're on it like white on rice, and and it's funny though, because when I first started on this channel, like if I said something wrong, there might be one or two people that would be like, how dare you, how you committed blasphemy, or, but most of the people were very understanding about it. And it's funny because I look back on, I don't watch my early videos, but Leon, I had to, for some reason, I was trying to edit something out of one of them. And I said, oh God, I'm cringeworthy, man, because I was an Elvis baby. Now I'm maybe an Elvis kindergartner, 5-year-old now. Like I'm so much older. I don't need to be exactly spoon-fed as much as I had to at the beginning. But that's what happens when you begin your journey into something. And one day I just want to do a whole Beatles channel so I could be the Leon of that channel. You know what I mean? I'll be like, okay, this is what Paul recorded on the 8th of May, and John was, but so if I feel so behind everybody on this, because I'll tell you what, I was just interviewing this great guy, Dylan. He's only 18, okay? And he knew so much Elvis stuff. I'm like, it's just a kid. And I'm like, yeah, and I mean, it's not like, oh, I just love this song and all that. He was listing his favorite. You'll see the interview in a couple weeks. He even had it down to, he even asked me, he goes, what's your favorite jumpsuit? Because that's kind of a topic of my fascination. He was going through deep detail of all the, kind of like one of those I felt like he's almost like borderline genius or something, because way too advanced in what he was talking about. And so it's really a treat, and it made me feel so thrilled to know that we're kind of the middle age, kind of almost toward that thing with the Elvis thing. We have our senior crowd, but I'm happy that there's up and comers that, oh man. And and I'll tell you what, it was really cool when we recorded that other live stream for honoring his birthday. I mean, that went off so well. And when I listed the songs that we reacted to, I said, what? Even though we took some of it by request, I go, that actually looks like such a great planned set list. Oh, man. And they'll be able to see those on the...
I think, though, that as you say, it's really good that we've got a younger generation coming in that way. But I'm actually, in a way, envious of the journey that you're on, because you're on that journey of discovery. And what's good about working with you on this is that I'm almost feel as if I'm in the same place, because what's happening is you're reacting to the stuff that I send you, and then as I watch you, I'm kind of discovering things that maybe from a different perspective, and it's quite enlightening that way. So what I'm getting out of that is it's great, because as much as I would love to be on the journey that you're on from almost a position of blindness, more to the point, because you're getting stuff that you never heard before, and I'm hearing stuff again. But what I'm getting, the perspective that I'm getting from your point of view, is like a whole new experience for me, and it's really, because I'm getting to experience stuff that I know inside out and back to front. I'm getting to experience it anew, and it's really, really, it's so refreshing. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny. Sometimes I listen to all the Elvis people speak of their expertise, a song that I heard for the first time, and they're like, I've known this for 35 years or whatever. And I feel like I'm the idiot in the room or something that's just learning how to spell or something. But yet, in another way, I thought of it in a positive way. I don't think our collaborations would be as special if we were both experts. The amateur and the expert combination, I think, works very well.
Well, see, you say that, but there are different types of expertise. You've got an expertise in what you do, because the way you react and the way you break it down, that's unique to you, because virtually no other reaction channel does what you do. Regardless of how unique the way that we collaborate is, even the way that you react is unique. So that's an expertise in itself. So you can put those two things together, and that's what to me, that's what I think makes it enjoyable. It makes your channel stand out from other reaction channels.
Well, yeah, I can't just sit back and move my head and say that was pretty cool, you know, goodbye everybody. And because I have to offer something beyond just playing the song. I'm not, you know, even though I always wanted to kind of be a DJ when I was younger, I always kind of had that host vibe. You know, I used to do emceeing at events, and it's really weird, Leon, because I can't really talk with a small group sometimes. I'll try to fake my way through it. Yeah. But you put me in front of 12,000 people, I could grab that mic, and I don't know, I just have that.
And it shows.
Yeah, and some people can't, like half of my friends won't be on this channel with me. I go, we could do reactions together, and they're like, I'm not getting in front of that camera. And it's funny because they could feel comfortable in everyday life where I'm not, but yet when I plug in and I'm staring out, I don't know, this like other part of me, I'm actually more confident in front of the camera than I am walking through a grocery store. I want to avoid people. I don't want to talk to them. I want to get out of there. But yet, I don't know. And I think it's kind of been a dream of mine to kind of find a way that I can mix a passion with a thing that connects with people, you know, because let's think about it. If you're trying to be a musical performer, you got to jump through so many hoops. If you're going to be an author, you got to get an agent. You got to have so many things fall into place. YouTube has allowed you to carry your vision through. Now, whether people show up or not, that remains to be seen, but at least you can create it. You can build it. And, and I hate to say it, but I think I always say whether 10 people show up or 10,000 show up, they're going to get the best of me 120%. That's why some videos I react to on my other channel, I know they're not going to go anywhere because it's an independent artist no one ever heard of, but someone requested it. And if I like it, I'm gonna play it.
But that's all that matters.
Yeah, but I've seen people, Leon, say don't recommend something unless if it's a top 10 hit or something, and I'm like, I can't do that. I can't. It takes away the joy of discovery. That's why, like, if you think about what I've reacted to on this channel, Leon, very few of it is actually just the hits. I still have people going, I still want to hear you react to Love Me Tender.
Well, of course, but that's just the way it is. But no pun intended. But
I know.
But it's just an obsession. But there's two things. There's two things that you do which is unique, and I'm trying not to be sycophantic here, but there's.
Well, I got a full disclosure. I paid Leon to say this. This is a paid endorsement. So now that's out of the way.
There's two things. First of all, you don't react to the same old songs that everybody else does. That's the first one. And the second one is that you don't drown yourself in cliches. Because if you watch a lot of reaction channels, they're all the same rhetoric. It's the same rhetoric all the time. What a vocal performance. Elvis was so good in this. That's it. But you react uniquely to each song that you hear. And that's the difference, as opposed to just trying to get views.
All right, so what could we look forward to next Sunday?
Well, next Sunday we're going to go back to another first take to the master.
Oh.
And we're going to do...
Drum roll.
Yeah. Do you remember during the live stream, we one of the very first things you asked me was about the new Back in Nashville set that's coming out in November?
Yes.
So we're going to take a song from that session. It's Only Love. And this is very interesting.
Oh my God.
Because you will see, as much of a genius as Elvis was, that even the best have struggles in the studio.
Okay, now that was a hook if I've ever heard of. And I'm going to ask everybody out there, go to Leon's channel. I'm going to get the link from Leon for that presentation. I would really prefer if you went and watched it there first. And then it will just seem more well-rounded if then you watch it another go. And when Leon and I come in at it, it'll kind of give more of a well-rounded take on the whole thing. So definitely one to check out. And I've reacted to that studio cut of that song before. So this should really be interesting. I want to thank you, Leon, as always. It looks like it's 2 a.m. The lounge is about to close. Last call already happened. I don't even drink. Why am I sitting in a lounge? I don't even know. But so thank you so much, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
All right. Thank you, Leon. Now, some of you might know this, some of you might not, but guitarist virtuoso James Burton had a birthday this month. So I thought to honor him, we would take a couple look at some YouTube videos that were centered around him. So once again, we step into the Elvis Presley Theater Auditorium. Let's do it.
Played on all those records with a Fender Telecaster, and got my sound, and it seemed to fit all the different styles of music I played on with the different artists. It was just a wonderful time for me working with Ricky. He was a wonderful guy, great talent, and we sort of grew up together. You know, Rick and I were the same age, a few months apart.
He was a genius, or is, at creating hooks and little motifs that he'd weave through a song that would make you come back again and again and wait for it to come around in the song, little hooks and things.
I only wanna please little Miss T. I only wanna please little Miss T.
What would you do with a Fender Telecaster, which originally had the 2 pickups? And I figured, you know, they haven't actually done a 3 pickup Telecaster, and I thought it would be great to do that with a 5-way switch to add more sounds and everything. We came up with the signature model with our name on the neck, and that was a program that Dan Smith and I put together with Fender. If I went to a session and I played the same thing the other guitar players playing, to me it wouldn't make any sense, because one of us don't need to be there. So it's very important that you can come up with a part that will add to the record. Play with so many different great entertainers, and it's good to broaden your music ability and your mind musically, and to go into a Ray Charles recording session, you're playing Ray Charles, and I still play my. Actually, it was maybe about the time I went to work with Ricky in 57, 58. I realized that listening to a lot of blues records, and I'm hearing all these slinky slides, you know, and bends and bottleneck sounds and steel guitar sounds, and I said to myself, you know, there's got to be a way to do that, but the strings on my guitar are too stiff. I mean, there's no way you could do that. So I got to thinking, maybe there's got to be a way to deal with that. So I decided to put lighter strings on, which was banjo strings. I took a set of banjo strings, and on the first, second, third, and fourth banjo string, and I realized that once I put those strings on, that I had an unwound third. You know, because the normal guitar only had 2 unwounds, which was the first and second, and then the third on up, they were all wound. So anyway, when I got to the 5th and 6th string, I realized that, well, I've got some very light strings here, but what am I going to do to kind of even it out? So what I did was I took a D string, and I moved it up to the A string for the 5th, and I took the A string and moved it up to the 6th string for the E. And I said, you know, it's perfect. It feels great. And the sound was so different and just incredible. The strings is like you're just all over the place. You know, the strings are so light. And I realized that the only thing putting banjo strings on, you know, I had, but they didn't come with a little ball on the end for the back bridge. And I figured, what am I going to do here? So I realized that I'd have to take that little ball off of a regular string and put it on the banjo string, and then run it through and put it on. And it worked. I mean, it worked out great. But every time I'd have to change strings, I'd have to do that. And I met Ernie Ball, back in the 50s, and Ernie invited me out to his music store. He wanted to talk to me about my sound and everything with the light gauge strings and everything. So Ernie came up with the idea to gauge strings and make different gauges. So a lot of guitar players could pick the string that they wanted for, you know, whichever gauge they liked. And that's how Ernie came up with the idea. And Rick and I went out and had a visit with him and talked to him, and I showed him my guitar and played for him. And so it was pretty interesting for him. And he said, well, he came up with the idea to do the strings by gauges. And I gauged my strings, and I came out with a 9, 10, 12, 24, 32, 38, which I've actually moved up to a 40 on the Big E, and it's not that much difference, but it works. It just works great for me. I love it.
Oh my God. Okay. First of all, I'm not a music theory I know what I like and I know what it sounds like. It's like the old saying, I don't know how to cook, but I certainly know how to eat. Okay, so it's kind of like that. So some of this was, but I tried to follow him. And one of the main things I gleaned from him is now it makes sense why some of his guitar work, even on some of the more subtler arrangements, stick out so prominently. He just, not only is this a testament of his skill, but his true sense of innovation. I didn't realize that he did so much to reinvent the guitar sound as we know it. And so my musical respect for him has just dilated tenfold after just watching this brief little bit. And of course, some of the scientific techno mumbo jumbo, I was just like, okay, I think I'm following in spirit what he's saying. 24, 38. I trust that the man knows what he's talking about. And we see it. It's axiomatic in the work and how memorable a lot of his guitar work is, and especially in the Elvis catalog. And, another thing I want to glean from this is just how humble he is. Sometimes there could be that, musicians can almost be like jocks, like I'm the most wicked bad kind of guy on the planet, and this is a guy who's just almost coming in from the mindset that I just want to do the best I can, and I want to take this where it can't go. Just the ego is just not there. I'm not feeling it from this, and God bless you, Mr. Burton. God bless you. Wow.
Of albums and jammed with such greats as Jerry Lee Lewis and Bruce Springsteen. But his fondest memories are of his days and nights on the road with Elvis Presley. Our Bill McGowan has the story of the King and I.
To the rest of the world, Elvis Presley was larger than life, an untouchable American icon. But James Burton knew a different Elvis.
One for the money, two for the show.
We just had a real great relationship musically, and we just kick back and relax and just, enjoy each other's company.
Burton played lead guitar with Elvis until his death in 1977. And after sharing a stage with him for 9 years, James Burton grew to know the man behind the crown. And life on the road sometimes proved Elvis could also double as the court jester.
Oh, yeah.
Elvis enjoyed playing pranks, and sometimes he was a good winner, but sometimes a sore loser. But anyway, this one particular night, he got a water gun, had a water gun on stage, stuck in his belt. Nobody knew about it. So he went over to, when he started introducing the band, he pulled his water gun out and started shooting everybody, and everybody just went nuts.
And although he may have been the king, no one was above retaliation by the boys in the band.
So we all got together and had a little meeting, and Joe said, he moves around on stage a lot. Why don't we just get some marbles, 10,000 marbles, and just put them all over the stage? So the second show,
that's dangerous.
Elvis came out.
I don't know
all
about
these
that.
Marbles. The curtain went up, and all these marbles, he went out, and we were playing the opening music, and it was amazing. All these marbles, and Elvis is trying to get through the stage without falling on, with these marbles. I mean, it's pretty dangerous, really.
James was more than Elvis's main man. He made his network debut as a teenager with heartthrob Ricky Nelson.
I knew there is, we never part, so hello, Mary Lou, goodbye, heart.
He went on to fan the flames behind superstars like Jerry Lee Lewis.
I didn't know that. Wow.
And he grew up to duel 6 strings with the boss. But it was somewhere in between, when he stood guard beside the king, that James Burton became immortalized in the minds of fans.
That's Polk Salad.
We used to call him Squirrely on stage because he never stayed in one place very long. So this watch, he gave me this watch, and on the back of the watch it says to James from Squirrely. He was such an idol for so many people, and for me it was just like, he was just like one of the guys.
Even if you've never noticed James, the songs wouldn't be the same without him, or his now infamous pink paisley guitar.
I hesitated for about 3 or 4 days before I played it with Elvis, it was so bright. But when I took it on stage and played, I thought I would just go ahead and surprise him one night, and I did. And he loved it. I had to play it ever since.
It has become as much of an Elvis trademark as his Taking Care of Business logo.
When I walked backstage one night between shows, he had one for me, and he said, "Here, James, this is for you," and he put it around my neck. And boy, it was a great feeling, you know, because it was something that he was very proud to do with certain members, and because they were family to him, and it made me feel good to know that I was accepted.
The gold records and piles of music awards which line his mantle are a hint at just how accepted James Burton has become. He's lost track of exactly how many albums he's played on, but estimates the count at somewhere around 400. And no matter who he's playing behind, they usually take a back seat when James begins to jam.
Yo, James!
When he's not on the road with John Denver, you can usually find James floating around Louisiana, where this hometown boy even has a day named in his honor. And most Shreveport residents will give you a good argument as to who the real king is. But when it comes to loyalty and legends, James's heart doesn't mind playing second string, as long as Elvis is center stage.
I had a real special thing about Elvis in my heart, and I miss, even today, I miss his music. It's all music I love. It's music I love playing, and it'll be here till after I'm gone. It'll live forever. It's great.
Wow, I would have just loved to have hung out with him, and just, I would sit silently, you know, beside him, you know, on that dock, and just savor just him just screwing around with the guitar. I mean, because this is, you know, he's a legend in his own right, and just, wow, what a musical presence, really. God bless you, Mr. Burton, and happy birthday, at the time of this taping, at least. Taping. Does anybody say taping anymore? At the time of this recording. Okay, last week on episode number 2, we had a discussion with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football, a fellow YouTuber, a great gentleman, an avid Elvis fan. He was not only kind-hearted and a great conversationalist, but such a wellspring of information and memories. He, in fact, the only reason we stopped the interview is because my voice went bad near the end. So, as we mentioned last week, that the second part of our interview with Mark were to take place. So we're going to watch the first clip of it, and then take a little break and do the Wonder Wheel, and then return for the second portion of the interview. So here we go with Fan Files.
Yeah, when we do get something out of these reaction channels that's a little bit beyond that was awesome, that's one of the statements that you'll hear readily, is that because they're not used to an authentic, genuine, raw performance that's just the instruments and the vocalists and the backup vocalists showing their talent and putting in the hard work and rehearsing, and then putting it out there on stage, and they're just not accustomed to that, and no theatrics around it, light shows, explosions, none of that going off. It's just, okay, this guy is that talented to pull that off on the stage and surround himself with very talented people to present something that's just pure music, and it's still captivating.
Yeah. And not only that, Mark, it's captivating after subsequent listens. Have you ever had that where you could have listened to a song many times, and then all of a sudden you're hearing one little nuance or something that, wow, I didn't even. It's almost like you're never really done in your Elvis learning journey. There's always an element out there of spirit that is yet to speak to you or anyone that listens. Now, regarding his content, you mentioned earlier you were listening to one of his soundtrack. What was it from? Was it
Girls? 1962. Yes.
Is there an Elvis film that you felt was a lot better than the treatment it was given by either critics or the public, that you think was almost underrated in your opinion?
Well, I think his acting ability by the masses is underrated, just because they're and I'm not going to promote him as a great all-time actor. I don't think he was given the material or the opportunity to be such. If he had that ability, and it could be argued back and forth whether he had, to that extent, great acting ability. But to consider that you can watch any Elvis movie, even some of the worst ones, and I always thought he showed up to do an honest day's work, and so he never mailed it in. But some of the more absurd ones, the ones that I will watch any Elvis movie at any time to a certain extent just to see him, but Clam Bake and Speedway and some of those, I just think that the role is so thin that it's difficult to give, it has no depth. The role there's no character there to sink your teeth into at all, so he could just do anything with it. That if you would just solely watch some of those movies, you'd think, oh, this guy's not a great actor. He's okay. But sometimes it'll hit me in watching these, because you'll see especially in the 60s movies, the post-Army movies, you will see a catalog. If you love classic TV during that time, you will see the roll call of the people that you will see on Green Acres and the Andy Griffith Show, and on and on and on. I once did a mental list of 21 characters that I saw in Elvis movies and on the Andy Griffith Show. And it hit me once that to compare Elvis's acting, which he basically never had acted in his life until his, he wasn't phased into this. It was Love Me Tender, you got the starring role, boom, you're the guy, and he'd never acted in his life, and just acted in those movies. It wasn't like he was doing anything in between to hone his acting skills, except for showing up to be the guy. I don't know that there's a person in the history of Hollywood who had to be on the screen as much as he did. If you watch an Elvis movie, there's a couple exceptions. He's on the screen 90% of the time, because that's why the movie was created, for Elvis fans to watch Elvis. So he had to carry the movie. So I say all that to say that I will notice that those very accomplished actors, character actors in many instances, you can't really see a separation. If anything, many times, I think they're kind of stiff. They're kind of just reading lines, and they're not looking very believable. Elvis is actually the best actor in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Walter Matthau, Brent, made a statement one time. He was talking about being in King Creole, which I believe is Elvis's best movie. And Walter Matthau, they were being, Curtiz is the last name. I can't think of the director's first name, but he also directed Casablanca and some other monumental pictures, and he was the director for King Creole, and Walter Matthau was playing a scene, and he pulled him aside and said, watch the kid over there, watch him act. He said, you're overacting. You've gone to too many, acting classes. You've been educated too much. He just acts the way he feels. He just feels the part, and it just comes out of him.
Yeah. And it shows on the screen too. And I think, like, when you do look at those, I was thinking when you said of all the stars, I remember thinking, wasn't Bill Bixby in like two of them? I think he was even in two of them. Yeah.
Yes, two of them. Yep.
And so I think sometimes, yes, if you go in with the presupposition that this is going to be cotton candy, okay, and you're not expecting a filet mignon, you're expecting cotton candy, elephant ears, greasy carnival food that is just fun to eat, but it's not going to really enrich you in any way, then you're going to have a good time. Because sometimes, like Elvis, is just fun to watch. He could be doing a plumbing commercial for a contractor. It would still be engaging to me, and because I think he just has that presence.
Brent, you made the perfect analogy without knowing it when you brought up the cotton candy and the carnival atmosphere, because my favorite Elvis movie, even though I acknowledge King Creole is Elvis's best movie, my favorite Elvis movie is Roustabout.
Oh, okay. See,
I don't know if you've gone through the soundtrack. I don't believe you have.
Well, we're knocking them off one by one, Leon and I, so I'm waiting for him to bring it to me, and then I react. And then Leon will send me the movie after, if I haven't seen it already. And but Roustabout, I never did see that one.
Barbara Stanwyck, and I just think maybe there's some just elements that come together. Elvis's maybe last acting role. This was in 1964, in which he was kind of a rebel. He played that well, but it was still a fun movie. I don't know. Maybe it goes deep into my childhood. It was one of the first ones that I saw, and I just think it's a charming movie. It's got enough credibility where I'm not going to sell it as what it's not, as you just stated. It's not an Academy Award winning picture, but it's not absurd. It's not ridiculous to the point. There's a little substance there, but it's a fun movie.
Yeah, and I think Elvis, had he lived, I really think he could have had another phase where, he kind of like Chris Christopherson or something, just got into some acting, being one of those, like some really meaty roles. I think he could have really gotten his hands dirty with that pleasantly and pulled something off, because you see elements of that. And I think too, when people say, oh, he's not a good actor, first of all, there's shades of acting. Not everybody's going to be Sir Laurence Olivier. Okay. And no one's expecting that. But I do think like Elvis could have gone head to head with James Dean any day of the week. That's my opinion. I think he had that charisma. And sometimes some people, like you said, they're just comfortable in front of the screen. Elvis didn't sit there and go to Stella Adler and learn how to method act like all those other guys at that period did. He just went and did it. And that's a natural talent. Because I couldn't do it. I couldn't go up in front of the screen and pretend to be James Bond or something. I would be lost within that. He had that natural charisma. And I think, now, you told me, I think you mentioned in Twitter or something, you got to go to an Elvis Film Festival or something last year, didn't you? Or a couple years ago?
I've been to Graceland.
Okay. You said you went to, they had like a screening of Elvis films at a movie theater or something?
Yeah, so I took my kids to Elvis Week, so they had no choice. But this was 2007, so yeah, they were in the 8 to 10 year old range, but they loved it. They wanted to go. Anyway, I take my kids down to Elvis Week in 2007, so it was the 30th anniversary of his death, and it was just remarkable. It was just I was just in awe of all the countries that were represented there, and all the activities, and it was just phenomenal. So one day, yes, they had an Elvis film fest of sorts, and they showed, I think, 4 Elvis movies. Yeah, Jailhouse Rock, Girl Happy. I can't remember the other 2 that they showed. Yeah.
I can only imagine what that's like, though, because, those of us who grew up with seeing Elvis movies on television, to actually see it in the theater with the music numbers, with the acoustics of the theater setting, that must have been, oh, man, I would have loved to have done that.
It was cool. It was very cool. I will say on the flip side of that, I was disappointed in this. About 6 months ago, they rolled out That's the Way It Is, which is, for some Elvis fans, just the peak of his career.
It's a pinnacle, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's arguable, but it's certainly in the running. And they released that in limited release in theaters, and I went to go see that. Unfortunately, because of COVID situations, I couldn't go with the person I was going to go with, so I ended up just going by myself. And however they mixed the audio, like I expected this complete massive upgrade, because I own the CDs and the deluxe CDs, and what they've done with the audio and cleaning it up is tremendous. But that was a big disappointment, because it was like listening to AM radio off in the distance.
Oh. Yeah, especially with the way they repackage for re-releases today. Yeah, you would think it would have been remastered and ultimate pristine kind of sound. And then sometimes they'll do that where they'll just re-release the movie and nothing has been done to it, or it's not even as great as it originally sounds on a DVD or something. And oh, that's oh boy, did you notice it like right away when it started? Like, this is not happening. Oh man.
Yeah, it was, because I just expected to hear the percussion and feel the bass, and because they've done that with That's the Way It Is. The original, I don't know if you've seen the original release of That's the Way It Is.
Mm-hmm.
The audio is horrendous. It's an embarrassment to an insult to his band and his vocals. I've heard Ronnie Tutt actually make a comment that he said when that came out, we were like, they've ripped the guts out of our, like, this is not what we sound like. It's awful. And so then they came out with a different release in 2002 that's much better. It's got, they remixed it, so it's much better. They use different cuts and different songs that I didn't necessarily agree with, but it's much better. But that's another subject matter when it comes to the mixing of Elvis albums and soundtracks, and I don't think he was given justice through much of his career from that standpoint, unfortunately, too.
Well, I was saying this to Leon in our last interview, and I think it's interesting because you're one of those people that comes on the message or the comment section, and you hear a lot of intricate things because you stated before, like, I didn't care for the way this was mixed or something like that. And it's funny because even like on the worst mixing of an Elvis song, to the naked ear, to someone who's not as familiar with Elvis, it still sounds much better than some other people's music. But I noticed that I'm starting to get like that now. I think because I'm getting more Elvis exposure and all that, I'm starting to pick things out more, like, okay, because there was a video I did a couple days ago, and that is My Little Friend. And I don't know if I'm going to catch heat on this or not, but I thought Elvis had some great vocals in it. But to me, and like I said, in the ear of the beholder, it felt like the strings were trying to compete with Elvis's voice, where I was wondering if maybe he just did this as like an acoustic guitar number or something and let his voice kind of lead the way. It might have been better, but you could put 10 Elvis people in a room and they're going to duke it out over which is the best version of this. And I guess it's subjective to a degree, but then there are some things that are just plainly, like you said, at that movie. I mean, I think almost any Elvis fan would agree that having the sound quality as bad as that for a re-release, man, that's just... I hate that too, because I'm the type that goes to a movie, Mark, and if the lights aren't the right way in the theater, if they're not dimmed properly or something, it takes one little thing to throw off my experience in that. So I can imagine, did you sit through the whole thing when you went?
Oh, I sat through the whole thing. I had driven like an hour to get there, and so I sat through it. And I was hoping maybe for some bonus clips or something else, and that wasn't even part of it, because my son and I went to go see the '68 Comeback Special a few years back. That was released in theaters, and they included some bonus clips and some interviews that enhanced it quite a bit. So that was really good. Yeah, if you go back, I'll go down two paths. One that you uncovered with the strings. So my son, he has discovered his favorite Elvis set, and it's called the Nashville Sessions. It was just released maybe 6 months ago. So I got it for him. That was his Christmas request. So I got that for him, and it's much of what you'll hear on the album, That's the Way It Is, and a couple other albums, Elvis Country, and it was recorded in the summer of 1970. And they took out all the production, all the post-production strings. It's just Elvis and his band. And I haven't listened to a lot of it, but my son's constantly feeding me versions to say, this is so much better than the final product. He just listens to that because he thinks stripped down just with Elvis and his band, it's so much better. And for the samples that he sent me, I had to agree. I said, yeah, that I didn't particularly like that song, but now listening to Elvis sing it raw just with his band. And that's another mark of a great artist, is that I often think that Elvis sounds better on stage than he does in a studio. I often think
10 times.
Who can you say this about?
No. Yeah.
And in this instance, that he sounds better. And I love the Sweet Inspirations, and I love the Imperials and the Stamps Quartet, the Jordanaires. They all enhanced his music incredibly. But in certain offerings, it was great to listen to just him sing without horns and strings, and just with his band. You know what that band could do at that time with James Burton and Ronnie Tutt and those guys. They were phenomenal, and especially on some of the grittier songs, where they're playing the blues, they're playing some rock country stuff where we don't need horns and strings and a whole lot of shaking going on, just let these guys jam.
Yeah, I think too, there was a tendency, because I think there were a lot of live productions where that brassiness and woodwind kind of stuff crept in and just made it so powerful. But I think it's like one of those things, it's balance. It's good in some cases you don't want it also competing with Elvis's voice. And sometimes it complements, in some, like in that My Little Friend, I felt, you might feel differently. I felt in that case, the strings, it felt obtrusive or something. It just, they were trying to creep in or something, and it was like they were vying for center stage with Elvis, where if they just left him with an acoustic guitar, heck, even just tone down a lot of the overdubbing and stuff, it would have been just a great raw number. And like I said, we're not in the producer's seat, but there are a lot of times where I want to go back. And talking about producing though, Mark, one thing I've learned in my Elvis journey that kind of really irks me in so many ways is how a lot of rock stars at the time act like the death of Elvis happened when he went into the army. And I'm listening to a bunch of like early 60s stuff and even 70s stuff, and I'm thinking some of this is his best stuff. So am I off, or are these brilliant musicians off?
I'm going to think that many of them may suffer from the same position that many of your viewers did when they said, that's not for me. And I'm sure many people could listen to the entire catalog and still say, that's not for me. I understand that Elvis is not for everyone. But I'm guessing that some of them, because I've had this experience with a ton of people in my life, that once I hand them some things and say, listen to this, just listen to this, that they then discover a whole layer or 8 or 18 layers of Elvis that they never knew existed. So maybe there's the thought that, okay, post-Army, bad movies, bad music, then he got lazy and fat in Vegas, and that's post-Army Elvis, and that's what it is.
Without even probably looking into it. And I almost think too, I think they saw maybe the army is like symbolic of him surrendering like that hellfire side of himself. Yes. And therefore, because he's not going to have that same spark, that same thing. So automatically, just that in itself, the cultural symbolism in that automatically just like nullified everything he did after that. It's almost like it's psychological why they don't like post-Army Elvis more so than his output.
And I also think that there is some truth in, so if you would compare Elvis and the Beatles, which many people do out there, and there's all sorts of debates and arguments out there, that the Beatles' run of greatness once they reached their I don't want to say their pinnacle. It depends from a Beatles fan what that was, because they changed their music so much. But basically 1964 to 70 was their run of success, because they were building up to 64 when they came to America. The more you limit a career, obviously, the less chance there is of it being derailed or hitting snags or low points.
Well, it's like in the James Dean in the film world. He only had a handful. Yeah. That's what kind of brought him immortality. Had he had a 30-year run.
Yeah. Had Elvis something tragically happened to him, after the Army or something like that, then, or after the '68 comeback special, then there's a different perspective on it. Yes.
Okay, rev your engines, everybody, because we are going to press our luck with the Wonder Wheel. Let's do it. And welcome to the Elvis Nation Show Wonder Wheel. This is how it works. If you have left a comment on the previous episode, your name is automatically placed on the Wonder Wheel for the next episode. I spin the wheel, and whoever's name lands gets a free Elvis song reaction of their choice that will air within 1 or 2 to 3 days after they win. Now, the winner must visit the comment section of this episode and list 1 request and 2 alternates, in case I've already reacted to 1 or 2 of them. Good luck, everybody. Banjo Paul. Well, Banjo Paul, you have just won yourself a fast-track request. I'll move it to the front of the line. All what you gotta do, like I said, is just go to the comment section, list that song and 2 alternates, and it's off to the races, my friend. Congratulations. Okay, congratulations. Now we're going to finish our interview with Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. Let's do it.
Their I don't want to say their pinnacle. It depends from a Beatles fan what that was, because they changed their music so much. But basically 1964 to 70 was their run of success, because they were building up to 64 when they came to America. The more you limit a career, obviously, the less chance there is of it being derailed or hitting snags or low points.
Well, it's like in the James Dean in the film world. He only had a handful. Yeah. That's what kind of brought him immortality. Had he had a 30-year run.
Yeah. Had Elvis something tragically happened to him, after the Army or something like that, then, or after the '68 comeback special, then there's a different perspective on it. Yes. Due to mismanagement by the Colonel, I will stand by that statement and could explain that for hours. And Elvis's excesses, really, what is a shame amongst many is that this man, if you want to take all his great attributes and the different things that he could do as an entertainer and boil it down to his finest, I think it's performing on a stage. And he did that from 1955, when he first hit the road, after That's All Right Mama and those first few recordings, when he and Bill and Scotty hit the road, to when he was inducted into the Army. So basically 3 years of performing, and we don't have a whole lot from that. We don't have concert footage. We have footage, it's grainy. We have the TV performances. So that's kind of his concert era or display from that era. And that's, I think, another thing that people don't appreciate now is they don't really realize how raw and and you do a much better job of coming up with terminology for this, just badassery. I'll steal from you there. He was in the 50s, because if you see the pictures and you dig into it, you get a better perspective. We see the TV shows. He toned it down for the TV shows. His Ed Sullivan Show appearances, Milton Berle, they're phenomenal. I love it. Love watching those. But he's doing 2 songs or 3 songs on a TV show. We didn't see the guy that threatened the establishment, and why the police would come out to his shows, and why mayors of certain cities would ban him, because we didn't. That's lost. But he had basically, as a performer on stage, had a 3-year window, and I don't even think it was 3 years in total. Basically, it was like 1956, 57, where he performed live. Off to the Army, he comes back. He does 3 shows, Hawaii and Memphis in 1961. There's some bad audio from the Hawaii show, but it sounds phenomenal. I would have loved to have seen Elvis perform in the 60s. I just think he would have been just at his peak. And then he comes back in the 68 comeback special, and he's really on his game for arguably, depending on your vantage point, 69, 70, 70. And then you start to see some cracks in the armor. Again, depending on your perspective, there's still some greatness there, but he was really on top of his game on stage for 3 or 4 or 5 years out of a 23-year career because of, again, mismanagement, putting him in movies from the time he's 23 until he's 34. Except for 1 or 2 performances, he's not on a stage where doing what he does best. I would have loved to have seen Elvis touring in the 60s. That would have been just phenomenal.
Well, I think too, especially when you think about it, his voice was maturing, and there were so many different avenues he could have gone vocally. So live, as far as live performances, we've lost a whole pocket of time. You're right. I would have. Could you imagine like Elvis, if the Colonel let him, like Elvis's 64 European tour or something? How awesome that would have been.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
if you get a chance, anybody out there that's not heard his performance from Hawaii in 1961, it's rough. The audio's rough. You got to listen to a lot of screaming, and it's the AM sound, but you get a feel for, what could have been this guy in 1961 on stage, but we never got to see it.
Especially
a handful of people, got to see it.
Well, Mark, if you think about it, how awesome it would have been if he gave certain soundtrack songs the live treatment during those times had he been on tour. Could you imagine what Viva Las Vegas would have sounded like, him singing that live, how he would have killed that? Oh, man.
I've heard you mention that a few times to say, man, I would love to have heard him do this with his 70s band live, and I've thought the same thing. Well, what's cool about the 61 show, and this would have been a disappointment for me, and this is something that you delve into from time to time in listening to these 1970-ish concerts, is Elvis wanted to expand his repertoire, and we see that obvious from selecting cover versions of modern songs. But man, I would have wanted to hear, the catalog from the 50s. And when he gave it its due, I almost, in some aspects, enjoy the 50s songs more, like from the period of That's the Way It Is, 69, 70, because he's got this killer band, and they can really tear it up. To hear All Shook Up and Blue Suede Shoes and Hound Dog is great, but I understand he still gave that run of songs in most of his shows, but in the 1961 Hawaii show, that's his catalog at that point. So for anybody who loves just listening to all of that, that's what an Elvis concert, I guess, would have been in 1961, and that's what it was, is just him running through his hits was the majority of it. So it's pretty stellar.
Well, I think he got a bad rap in the 70s because I think, like today, we don't see someone in their mid-30s as being old, but in like rock and roll years, you're almost on the verge of extinction. And I think he wanted to show, hey, I'm still relevant. I still have a voice. And yet, had he just done his 50s stuff only, it would have been for the malt shop crowd that wanted to recreate their past or something. And so he was kind of battling because he still had a very contemporary presence as well. And that's why I love when he did that fusion of that, like when he just, when we were reacting to some of those Vegas shows and he's sitting down with the acoustic. I mean, there were just some amazing moments there. And like I said, I think there were a lot of his soundtrack songs that would have been really cool if he gave it the jazzed up live treatment that he has been known to do. And I mean, really, when you think about it from the movies, of the 60s movies, at least I'm talking about, I mean, Can't Help Falling in Love with You became his closer. I mean, that was, and what did you think of that version? Do you have a favorite version of that? I thought the one, Elvis on Tour was a good one, but I'd like to hear it from an expert like you, what you thought.
That is a great question. I keep bringing up my son, but a lot of things tie back to him. I think he would still say that's his favorite Elvis song, the original, the soundtrack 1961 version. So you have that one, and then you have the movie version, which I love as well, which of course was recorded at the same time, but it's a different version. Then you have the 68 comeback special. You have the various versions from 69 and 70. My favorite version of Can't Help Falling in Love, I guess, has to still be the original recording in 1961. My favorite live version, I would not typically say this for other Elvis songs because I thought he really killed it in 69 and 70, but he was kissing girls and walking around and doing all that, it seems, in 69 and 70. Then he kind of got away from that and actually cut it straight. So I like some of those versions from 72, Elvis on Tour, Madison Square Garden, in that run as well.
Yeah, and I think, I almost think the live and recorded studio versions are almost like comparing apples and oranges if you think about it, because one was the recorded studio was more about the subtlety, and the live versions were very pumped up and that triumphant close and stuff like that. So I like how they took it in a different direction, because it was really a mellow song and they just turned it, and it's almost like it gets you sentimental when you watch him close with that in concert. I don't know why. At least me, it does. I don't know. You see a guy closing a concert, and especially when you watch some of those later Elvis performances, that these people had no idea that this would be the last time they would ever get to see him live, those who attended and stuff like that. And I feel like that's one of the great losses of my life, is that I'll never get to see him live. And that's just the luck of the draw,
Yeah, we've kicked around that question as well. If you could go back and watch an Elvis performance, where would you go for this performance? Would you go to the 50s? Would you go to the 68 comeback special? Would you go to Aloha? Where would you go if you could just have one Elvis concert to go watch?
Yeah, you got me thinking now about that Hawaii show. Now I'm like ever since you said that, like the Pavlovian dog thing in my head's going salivate. You just heard a bell ring that is very intriguing, because I have not reacted to that yet. And I don't even know if it's on YouTube. If someone put that 61?
Oh, it's up there. If you look up, 1961 Elvis live Hawaii.
What were the circumstances surrounding that performance? Was it for a certain reason, or was it? He wasn't on a tour or anything at that time, was he? Or
no, I know that it was a benefit for the USS Arizona, the Pearl Harbor attack, the ship that was sunk. So that's the only attachment that I know. The only reason why he would go to Hawaii, just for and I don't even know if it was just one show or he did 2 or 3, and that was the only one recorded. I'm not positive on that, but that's the only one I know of, was that one performance in 1961. And then he did like a day-night doubleheader in Memphis a month or 2 prior to or after. These were in the spring of 61.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all he did.
Now, what I wanted to ask you about, because you're a good authority on Elvis, you have a very balanced view. Where do you stand on biopics about Elvis's life? Do you shy away from it, or is it a guilty pleasure, or where do you stand on that stuff?
The Priscilla book, Elvis and Me, there's a copy of it upstairs, and I've glanced at it. I didn't purchase it, so I've looked into it a little bit. There is what I believe most people consider the definitive Elvis biography by Peter 𝘓𝘓𝘬𝘕, if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, who wrote Last Train to Memphis is the first half of the biography, and then Careless Love is the second. And I've heard him, another great listen is 𝘓𝘓𝘬𝘕's interview with Conan O'Brien. He's being interviewed by Conan O'Brien, who does like over an hour on a podcast maybe 5-6 years ago, talking about these versions of this Elvis biography. The first half leads you to the Army, from birth to the Army, and then the rest of his life, which is called Careless Love. I have purchased, I don't buy too many things for myself, but it hit me a few months ago that, okay, I'm gonna treat myself. And so I jumped on Amazon because I've wanted these for a long time. And there's a third book that I don't know the name of it, but it basically takes you through practically a day by day in Elvis's life. So if you're really into information, knowing that, the gate receipts from this concert were this, and he sang this, and a lot of information there, that's one to look up. It's again, I wouldn't want to attempt to figure out what the name of it is. So I bought those 3 books, and I've only cracked the Elvis day by day. And one discovery I came up with, and that starts way before Elvis's life even, to give you some lead into his life with his parents, but you get a real good feel for the turbulence of his childhood. I didn't realize, you knew that he was poor. I've been to the house where he lived his first 10 years. And even that's not completely true. That the one room shack of sorts in Tupelo, that he basically was kind of moved from place to place because his dad, his father wrote some bad checks and was in prison for roughly 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years, right around the time Elvis was like 3 to 5, 3 to 6. And then his father was constantly looking for work, constantly being laid off, fired. A temporary job would run out, and moving all over the place. And so Elvis and his mom were moved from apartment to cousins' houses and all over the place, as his dad was constantly struggling to maintain employment. So that's about where I am in that read. I've just started it. I'm blasting away at this college football channel thing, just at kind of an insane rate that I wouldn't want to continue for the rest of my life. So I'm not doing too much else.
I wanted to ask you about that because I tuned into one of your videos lately where you were planning to do a 24-hour feed. And did you ever end up making plans for that? Is that going to happen soon?
So most of college football kicks off Saturday, September 4th.
Okay.
There are games on that Thursday, September 2nd. So the plan is that if I carry through on post game of the September 2nd games that Thursday to like 2 in the morning, if I want to go 24 consecutive hours, then I start that at 2 a.m. the previous night. So that is what I've committed myself to. I'm insane.
And that will get you committed, in fact. So that kind of works out perfectly. No, you got to do like what Jerry Lewis would do on the television. Give it like, I'm
going to hand it off.
Yeah, hand it off, and then you get to catch some Z's there. And
the 25-year-old me would have said, I'm going to pull it off. I'm going to be here for 24 consecutive hours. But that went through my mind. But yeah, I'm going to hand it off as many times as I can possibly take a hour or two nap.
Now, I've always wanted to ask you this. You're interviewing people a lot. You spend a lot of your time where this is kind of a small crunch for me. Most of it's just me talking directly to the camera. Are you an introvert by nature, an extrovert by nature? Or so does this come easy for you to interview, or does it take the wind out of you, or how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, I'm not like a gregarious, just overflowing with energy, and I'm not going to be the guy that's going to take over a party with all sorts of I'm pretty much a balanced individual when it comes to communication and wanting to be around other people. I'm not a loner. I miss not being around people if it's for a time. But yeah, I'm not. I definitely reach my limits in doing what I'm doing, to where I don't consider myself a natural talker, extrovert. Just want to hear myself talk all the time. And that's one of the reasons why I started reaching out to other people to bring them in. I started this channel and just did all of the analysis myself. And there were other reasons. I wanted to get more expert perspectives on particular teams, but also because I didn't want to hear myself talk all the time, nor did I think anyone else wanted to, that I wanted to engage in a conversation with people.
Yeah, because the vibe I always get is like I said, you're balanced. You're not gregarious, but you're not quiet either. But I remember like that first episode when you came back from after your ESPN kind of thing going on there. You went to the camera and you went like, yes, or something. Now I'm going, that doesn't seem like Mark to me. I go, you must have really been coursing, jubilation must have been coursing through you, because it felt like you were liberated or something. I'm like, okay, now he's got a whole new era in his career going on here. And yeah, and it's funny because I think a lot of times with producers like you and I, our hosts, people wonder, is that the real you? Is that and I tell them with me, the fake me is more on the outside. I'm kind of quiet. I don't really talk a lot to people, but when I'm on camera, I can't talk to 5 people. You bring me to 5 strangers' house for dinner, I'll just be like, oh man, I got to get out of here. But in front of the camera, for some reason, I could talk in front of 5 million with no problem. And but yet I'm an introvert, believe it or not. And so when I'm done reacting for a day of all videos, man, I am just, the wind is sucked out of me, because you're kind of on when you're broadcasting. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize there's like an energy drain that goes on, but yet it can recharge your battery at the same time. So I always am in awe that I'll see that you went like live sometimes 3 times in one day or something. And I don't know how you do it. I envy that power crystal that lies within you or something, because I don't have it.
Well, I've had to do something, and I feel blessed, and I'm grateful for this over the last couple of weeks. And this has really been the first time when I've gone live that I've had to tell people to stop calling. Okay, I've been on for 3 hours. I appreciate the calls, and I can see that I can't see that any more than 3 are waiting. There could be 18 waiting. There could be 3 waiting. But I've had to say, okay, I've been on for over 3 hours. Like, I am dead. I'm exhausted. I probably make no sense at this point. Why would you even be watching? So please stop calling, and we'll hold those calls for another time. But I create so much content that at times I have to check myself and say, Mark, are you really giving your best? Are you? And it becomes so comfortable at some point that I'm not intentionally mailing it in, but I'll think, okay, over the last few days, you've just kind of hit record and just, it's good to be comfortable, but maybe comfort with the awareness that, let's deliver this with some energy and some focus. And that's where I try to lead myself to each and every time. But that sometimes you can drift into bad habits.
Oh, hosts do that. We're human beings. We have a limited amount of energy, and we still have real lives outside of this with real obligations. And I've caught myself, Mark, before going in front of the camera and 2 seconds into a song going, I'm just not feeling this today. I'm not, and like in my mind right now, I'm not even connected with anything. I'm either too tired or I'll shut it off the camera. And then like, sometimes I'll just take a nap or something. I'll come back up. Okay, it's really happening now. I'm really into this. And I only want to capture myself at the best. And people say, I remember one time I was listening to your show. This one guy was being a serial prankster and like messing with you. And I'm thinking, like, where do these people, they have no life or something? Because I've had a couple of people try to punk me on a couple of things. Like, one guy sent me an email saying, you asked for new advice on how to make your content better. How about you shoot yourself on video and let your brain spill, because I'm tired of listening to your stupid voice. And I said, I don't know, YouTube might block that. I just try to be funny with it. I don't let it get to me. You have to have a thick skin to be in this, because you're going to get haters no matter what. But I gotta be lucky. I gotta admit, I'm lucky. 99% of the people tend to be very nice, and I only get a problem person every now and then. But I think what I like about your show also is what's intriguing for those of you who might listen to only like podcast kind of stuff. You have your stuff on like iTunes podcast, right? Your episodes?
I do, but I would not recommend going over there right now just because I am hit or miss in regards to actually following through. First of all, I produce too much content to put over there. I wouldn't want to just flood my audio platform. But I should be posting one per day is what I need to do. And I got to say, with everything I've ported to YouTube, that gets forgotten much of the time. So maybe this would be a good Kickstarter to, if I know some people are going to join us on iTunes and all the various podcasts, Spotify. Where else are we? We're on most Google Play. That I should be posting something, stripping the audio and posting something every day there. Yes.
Well, and I as one host to another, I love it when someone puts their heart and soul into something, but not only that, but their content is great. That's why I will never recommend on YouTube something simply because I like the person or something. It has to be something I believe in. So I go on YouTube all the time, and I love it because I've seen it a couple of times where people said, oh, wow, I didn't know there was a guy who does Michigan stuff. I'll have to check it out. And that makes me feel so good because, people assume that we have giant budgets for advertising. I see the Mark Rogers commercial on CNN every 5 minutes. No, it doesn't happen that way. And word of mouth is a vital tool. Mark, I don't even understand it to this day because I'll go on someone's YouTube channel. They only put on 20 videos and they have like 3 Elvis things, but like each of their Elvis reactions have like 8,000 hits. And I'm thinking, what am I doing wrong? I don't know. Like sometimes that's where it's hard as a host because you don't know how someone who has no experience and yet they just amass all these hits. And that's the part that's a drag. I almost have to not look at that sometimes, Mark, because that could be discouraging. I don't look at that anymore. I just say I want to put out the best thing I could put out. But I like what you did on your show too. You also put in the Amazon tie-in, so you're very on top of what you're doing, and so that's why I'm going to tell everybody in the audience right now. If you know someone that's even into it, doesn't even have to be you. If you know someone that's into this, please support these channels because it depends on viewers like you. And like I said, I've test driven. I'm a fan of this channel. I've watched it myself. I wouldn't tell you guys to watch it if I didn't watch it.
Even within the college football realm, I have to talk so much about really things that aren't related to what's going out on the field because of various issues, NCAA violations here and there, and domestic issues that affect situations that it's nice to finally get back to a place where, okay, we can watch the games. That's why we're here, is to watch the games, enjoy the games, the entertainment on the field, and talk about that.
Yeah, it's funny because it becomes so part of my I listened to the Michigan stuff throughout the summer and off season and a few other of the teams that you cover, but really my heaviest, I put on my Facebook anniversary post that came up, and I said my Saturdays from like September to this, it's recording some Elvis stuff and listening to Mark Rogers while I edit and everything. And I go, because it's kind of become the soundtrack for a lot of people during that time. It kind of complements the game. It's almost like you can't have one without the other. And so I'm really kind of cool. And I thought one thing you did well, and I'm not just saying this to be obsequious, but there was like some politics that tried to seep into sports, and you said, I'm basically going to take care of this in one episode and address it and then move on. And you spoke about humanity, and I thought it was really exciting. But I loved it that you kind of hit your target and then you went back to what you did. You didn't let the kind of fringe sensational topics overtake the love of the game. And I thought that was such a balanced take on that. And because it is hard when you have something you love. It's almost like me with Elvis. I don't want to hear, I'm trying to talk about the man, the legend, and his thing, and then I have to like take time out of my day to talk about, to prove he's not a racist. And but you're right, sometimes these horrible topics, it takes away from the love of the game that everybody should be focusing on. And I love that football to me is always been one of those unifying things. Rich man, poor man, everybody coming together and leaving all of our titles at the door, and I want that to stay in sports. And do you think that's kind of getting back to where it is a little bit?
Well, I think the games will help. College football is such a short season. We have to embrace it. Yes. In terms of the span on the calendar, but also the number of games that are played. And it's such a precious commodity for a sports fan versus the NBA season, for example, that seems to go on endlessly. And as soon as they're done, they turn around and go to training camp again. That, I hope it can unify some people. The pure entertainment and joy of the games themselves.
Has there ever been, I asked this about Leon, and I'm dying to hear what you would say about this. Has there ever been an Elvis song that really didn't move you, but through subsequent listens, you found new things each time and it turned out to be a great song to you?
So I thought we were headed down a little bit different path, and I'll take it this way. So there's plenty of Elvis music that doesn't move me, that I don't think is very good. I think he recorded, the number is 711 studio songs, and then if you factor in some of my favorite songs he never recorded in a studio, Polk Salad Annie, Proud Mary, Never Been to Spain, on and on. Johnny Be Good, never recorded in a studio. So well over 1,000 songs total are there, plus their various versions. That there are plenty of Elvis songs that I don't believe are quality songs, whether that be because of the engineering involved and the composition of the song then was just some kind of throwaway song, or that he wasn't on his game at that particular stage of his career. The one song that this would probably surprise a lot of people because of the obvious impact of this song, and this seems to get as much, if not more, credit and adulation at this time in the reaction community than any other, and that's If I Can Dream. So if you took the 15-year-old Mark, played him If I Can Dream, like that was, I'd skip that on I bought the 68 Comeback Special album when I was 13 or 14 years old. I never listened to If I Can Dream. It just didn't do anything for me. I can't really explain it. I had an understanding of the words and I knew what they meant, but I didn't know how important and impactful and meaningful they were. Yeah. So that's a song that I've just grown to appreciate.
And we will be having Mark again on the show to continue our Elvis discussion. I want to thank you so much, Mark, and I hope you have a blessed week. And remember to TCB, and God bless you, sir.
It's an almost endless topic, and I appreciate you, Brent, and everything that you're doing to honor Elvis's greatness and legacy.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much, Mark Rogers. What a great guy. Like I said, he's a wellspring of information. He's very convivial. Just has that great broadcaster kind of vibe. I wish I had that. And so those of you out there, if you want to give Mark a helping hand, it would be a favor to me. Please go and tell any college football fans that you know of to head to his channel, to watch his videos, hit the like button on those videos that they're watching. And even if you want to go a little extra mile yourself, copy one of the links to his videos and post it in your Facebook page and let people know out there who might be college football fans. Because I'm telling you what, we YouTubers, we got to kind of help each other. You know what I mean? Because we are really going against the grain here when it comes to carving our own pathway out and stuff. And it's something that rewards you in the long run, but it's a lot of the grind to getting there. And don't I know? And now we're going to close today's special with something I was just so geeked about. This was totally unplanned until a couple days ago. In the comment section, Sally Cook, God bless you, you kind soul, sent me a link for a video of Elvis singing My Little Friend. And for those of you who might have seen the original reaction that I had to the studio cut, I liked it. I liked his vocals. I liked the lyrics. I just found a lot of great. However, I wasn't crazy about the strings. So the undubbed master version of that song, she presented, and I am just so geeked for this. So step into the Elvis Presley Auditorium and let's react.
And a worried mind resorts to wandering off to ponder things I never talk about. A pretty girl I used to know, but wouldn't know if we met face to face. And defying every logic known, I wish the time machine could take me back again. To the wonder of my first love, the old folks teased me about, referring to her only as my little friend. Somewhere far away, and maybe not so far away, a child has grown into a woman of the world. I assumed this knowing that she knew so much of life at such a tender age. I learned from her the whispered things the big boys at the pool hall talk about. The thrill and disappointment, fear and shame that first love brings. But oh, how I thought I loved my little friend. fragrance of the green grass mingle with the scent of love and womanhood. A moonlight night I kissed and cried and swore I'd never touch another girl. But time moved fast and I moved on, and I loved others time and time again. But with each time I thought of her and always gave a little more, a symbol of remembrance for my little friend. Oh, a symbol of remembrance for my little friend. Oh, a symbol of remembrance for my little friend. Oh, a symbol of remembrance for my little friend. Oh, a symbol of remembrance for my little friend.
Okay, for those of you who didn't see the original, I had a complaint. I mean, I really liked the song, but I felt it could have been better handled, better produced without the orchestration and then wow, I land on this, and you know what? My instincts, I felt like I was right on that one, because Elvis's voice, there's so much more attention drawn to his voice in this version. They should just let this go the way it was. That's just me. You might disagree. That's cool. But I mean, listen to the clarity of his voice and just how there's so much texture there. You can hear layer within layer. And that's why he is like a symphony in and of himself, you know?
Remembrance for my little friend. Oh, a symbol of remembrance for my little friend.
I mean, his voice just so much. I'll even go back to
a pretty girl I used to know, but wouldn't know if we met face to face. And defying every logic known, I wish the time machine could take me back again.
Oh, like that back again. Yeah, that first of all, the whole thing, if you could put like an algorithm digital display of the different trajectories his voice hits, that program would just combust, or that app would bust, because it would burst wide open, because it would say, I can't handle this vocal range. You'd get an error message.
Back again.
Oh, just
to the wonder of my first love, the old folks tease me about, referring to her only as my little friend.
Wow. Well, that wraps up episode number 3. Number 3 in the can. I can't believe we made it to episode number 3. And always trying to think of new ideas. I don't know. Maybe I'll do some skydiving with a big Elvis banner or something. You know, we gotta kick it up a notch each time. Anyway, thank you so much for all the support and kindness you've shown. I will do my best to deliver great content to you guys. You guys are awesome. And thank you for those of you who also gave donations. And it's such a blessing to be here. So until we see you again, go out, get your piece of the peace. TCB, my friends.